When my wife, Emma, first mentioned the party, I didn't think much of it. Just another night out with her friends, or so I thought. But then came the details, vague, incomplete, and evasive. It wasn't just any party. It was one of those parties, the kind where drinks flowed endlessly, inhibitions were left at the door, and the guest list included people with questionable morals. "John, it's just a small gathering," she said with that innocent smile she used to diffuse every argument. But I knew better. Small gatherings didn't involve people like Brian Matthews, a local photographer known for his charisma and his habit of getting too close to other men's wives. I told her I didn't want her to go. "Emma, these people, they're not your friends. They're vultures, looking for their next drama to feed on. I don't trust them, and I sure as hell don't trust him." She rolled her eyes, brushing off my concerns like they were nothing more than paranoia. "John, don't be ridiculous. I need this. I've been stuck in the house, working, cleaning, and dealing with—" She hesitated, but I caught it. "Dealing with me." That stung, but I didn't back down. I said, "No, Emma, and I mean it." My voice was firm, unyielding, but she went anyway. That night, as I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, I kept replaying our argument in my head. The way she walked out, the way she slammed the door without even looking back. It wasn't the Emma I married. Something had changed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to find out exactly how much. I picked up my phone to distract myself, scrolling through social media, trying to push the gnawing anxiety out of my mind. And that's when I saw it. A shaky, poorly lit video from the party. The caption read, "Another wild night with the gang." I almost didn't notice her at first, but then there she was, Emma, standing far too close to Brian. They weren't touching, not quite, but the way he leaned into her, the way she tilted her head and smiled at him, it was enough to make my blood run cold. I watched the clip 3 times, each replay twisting the knife deeper into my chest. The comments didn't help. "Brian's got a new target, huh?" wrote one user. Another chimed in with, "Emma's looking a little too comfortable there." By the time the video ended, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it looked. But deep down, I knew better. She didn't come home until morning. The sound of the front door creaking open woke me from a restless sleep on the couch. The clock on the wall read 6:14 a.m. Morning light crept through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. My head was pounding, but not from alcohol. I hadn't touched a drop. My body was fueled solely by adrenaline and anger. I didn't turn to look at her when she walked in. Instead, I stared blankly at the muted TV, pretending to be absorbed in the news ticker scrolling across the screen. My heart raced as her footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and deliberate, as though she were testing how much she could get away with before I confronted her. "Morning," she said softly, her voice almost cheerful, like nothing was wrong. I didn't respond. When she stepped into the room, I finally glanced at her. That's when I saw them. 2 faint, purplish marks on her neck, just below her collarbone. My stomach churned. They were unmistakable. She noticed my eyes fixating on them and touched her neck absent-mindedly, as if realizing for the first time what she was exposing. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but it vanished just as quickly, replaced by something far more calculated. "John," she began, her tone sweet, almost playful. "Do you want to know what I did last night?" Her words hit me like a slap across the face. She wasn't even trying to deny it, wasn't even pretending to feel guilty. My throat tightened, and I forced myself to stay calm. "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold. "Enlighten me." She tilted her head, studying me like I was the one under a microscope. "No accusations? No yelling? That's surprising." I clenched my jaw, the effort to hold back my anger physically painful. "I'm giving you a chance to explain," I said. "You'd better make it good." Emma smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile I used to fall in love with. This one was laced with something darker. Defiance, perhaps, or maybe even satisfaction. "Oh, John," she said, shaking her head. "You always think you have everything under control, don't you?" I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I snapped. She shrugged, moving toward the kitchen like we were discussing what to have for breakfast. It means you don't know everything. And maybe you never did. Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mind raced with questions, but none of them seemed worth asking. What could I say that would make this situation any less catastrophic? Cut the games, Emma, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Tell me what happened last night. She paused, her hand resting on the counter, and turned to face me. For a moment I thought she might actually come clean, that she might show even a shred of remorse. But instead, she smiled again, that same infuriating smile, and said, "You already know, don't you? You've seen the video." And just like that, she had me cornered. My pulse thundered in my ears as I tried to figure out how to respond. Admitting that I'd seen the video would mean revealing that I'd spent the entire night obsessing over it, that I'd already convicted her in my mind. Staying silent would give her the upper hand, letting her keep playing this twisted game. Finally, I managed to speak. "I don't need to see a video to know what you did," I said. "You're wearing the evidence on your neck." Her hand flew to her throat again, her confidence faltering for the first time. But it was fleeting. She straightened up, her expression hardening. "Fine," she said. "Believe what you want. But remember this, John. Not everything is as black and white as you think it is." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, fists clenched and heart pounding. As I listened to the sound of the shower turning on, one thing became clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After Emma disappeared into the shower, I stood motionless in the living room, her words echoing in my mind. Not everything is as black and white as you think. But no matter how much I tried to make sense of what she said, one thing was clear. I needed answers. And I needed them now. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, unlocking it with trembling fingers. The video I'd seen the night before was still open, paused at the exact frame where Emma was standing far too close to Brian Matthews. My chest tightened as I pressed play again, forcing myself to watch every second of it, no matter how much it hurt. The video wasn't long, just under a minute, but it was enough. In the dim, chaotic lighting of the party, Emma and Brian were standing near the bar. His hand rested casually on the counter, dangerously close to hers. She laughed at something he said, tilting her head back just enough to make it seem intimate. And then he leaned in, his lips grazing her ear as he whispered something. The room around me seemed to blur as I replayed that moment over and over. It didn't matter that there was no kiss, no blatant act of betrayal. The tension between them was enough. Anyone watching this would see the same thing I did. A connection, an unspoken understanding that had no place in my marriage. I scrolled through the comments again, each one feeling like a dagger to the chest. "Brian's got his charm turned up to 11 tonight," wrote one user. Another commented, "Emma's married? Could have fooled me." I wanted to smash my phone against the wall, but I knew I couldn't afford to lose it. This video wasn't just a source of pain, it was evidence. Proof that Emma had crossed a line, even if she refused to admit it. For the next hour, I searched for more. More videos, more photos, more context. I scoured the profiles of everyone who'd been tagged at the party, looking for any trace of Emma and Brian. What I found only made things worse. In one photo, they were sitting together on a couch, drinks in hand. Emma's legs were crossed, her knee brushing against his. His arm rested along the back of the couch, his fingers just inches from her shoulder. They looked comfortable, like they belonged there together. Another video showed them on the dance floor, their bodies moving just close enough to make my blood boil. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. Anyone watching could see the chemistry, the electricity between them. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at my phone, my thoughts spiraling into darker and darker places. All I could think about was how easily she had lied to me, how she had walked out of the house the night before without a second thought, knowing exactly what she was doing. By the time Emma emerged from the shower, dressed casually in a loose sweater and leggings, I had made a decision. This wasn't going to end with an argument or a half-hearted apology. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. If she wanted to play games, I was going to play too. She walked into the kitchen, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Do you want coffee?" she asked, her tone light, almost casual. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "No," I said. "I want the truth." Her hand froze on the coffee pot, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. But then she smiled, that same infuriating smile she'd given me earlier. "I already told you, John," she said. "Not everything is black and white." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Then let's make it black and white," I said. "Why don't you start by explaining why Brian Matthews' arm was around you in 3 different photos from last night?" Her face paled, the color draining from her cheeks as the weight of my words hit her. But she didn't deny it. She didn't even try to come up with an excuse. Instead, she set the coffee pot down and turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "You've been busy, haven't you?" she said, her voice calm, almost amused. "You have no idea," I replied. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw it in her eyes. Fear. After her initial reaction of fear, Emma quickly masked it with her usual composure. It infuriated me how easily she could slip between emotions, like switching masks for a performance. "All right, John," she said, crossing her arms. "You've clearly done your research. So why don't you tell me what you think happened?" Her words were a challenge, a dare. But I wasn't about to play into her hands. "I don't think, Emma." "I know," I replied, my tone sharp and unyielding. "I know what I saw. I know you were with him, Brian. I know you didn't come home because you were too busy. Whatever it is you were doing." She tilted her head, her lips curving into a smirk. "You're jumping to conclusions again. You always do that, don't you?" I ignored her deflection and pressed on. "You weren't answering your phone. You lied about the kind of party it was. And then there's the video, the photos, the marks on your neck. What more do I need, Emma?" She stayed silent for a moment, staring at me like she was trying to calculate her next move. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, she said, "Fine. If you want the truth, I'll give it to you. But I guarantee you won't like it." I braced myself, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear her next words. "Yes, I was with Brian last night," she admitted. "We talked, we danced, and yes, I let him get a little close." She said it so casually, like she was confessing to forgetting to pick up milk from the store. "But that's all it was, John, dancing and talking. You've built this whole narrative in your head. But you weren't there. You don't know what happened." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. "And the marks?" I asked, my voice trembling with restrained anger. "How do you explain those?" She shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "Brian's a flirt, and he gets handsy when he's drunk. I didn't stop him as quickly as I should have. That's on me, and I'm sorry, but it didn't go beyond that. You have my word." Her word. It meant nothing to me now. "Your word," I repeated bitterly, shaking my head. "How do you expect me to believe you after all this?" "Because I'm telling you the truth," she said, her tone softening. "I know I've made mistakes, John, but I didn't cross the line. Not the way you think I did. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the image of her and Brian together was burned into my mind, and no amount of apologizing could erase it." "Even if that's true," I said, "what you did was still a betrayal. You disrespected our marriage. You disrespected me." Her face hardened again, her defenses going back up. "Don't act like you're perfect, John," she said coldly. "You're not exactly innocent in this marriage either." That caught me off guard. What the hell is that supposed to mean? "You've been distant for months," she shot back. "You bury yourself in work, you barely talk to me, and when you do, it's only to criticize. Do you even remember the last time we laughed together? The last time we went out, just the two of us?" Her words cut deeper than I expected. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been distant. But that didn't justify what she did. "Don't turn this around on me," I said. "You made your choices, Emma. Now you have to deal with the consequences." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. "This conversation isn't over." I didn't wait for her reply. I just walked out, slamming the door behind me. In the car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. Her confession felt incomplete, like she was only telling me part of the story. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more, something she wasn't saying. So instead of driving aimlessly, I made a decision. If Emma wouldn't tell me the whole truth, I'd find it myself. I opened my phone and started scrolling through Brian Matthews' social media. He was the key to this puzzle, and I was determined to uncover every piece, no matter how ugly it might be. Brian Matthews. The name alone had been a thorn in my side for months. He was one of those guys everyone seemed to like. The life of every party, the guy who always had a joke ready or a drink in hand. But to me, he was a snake, slithering too close to my wife under the guise of being friendly. I sat in the car outside a coffee shop, my phone in hand, scrolling through his Instagram. His profile was a curated gallery of good times. Pictures of him laughing with friends, holding a camera to his face, and, of course, surrounded by beautiful women. The captions were just as obnoxious as I expected. "Another epic night in the books?" Or "Life's too short not to have fun." I hated everything about him, from his smug smile to the way he seemed to bask in the attention. But I wasn't here to hate. I was here to dig. As I scrolled deeper, I noticed something interesting. He wasn't just some party boy with a camera. Brian worked as a professional photographer, specializing in nightlife and events. His feed was filled with high-quality shots of people at parties, each one perfectly edited to look glamorous and exciting. But then I saw a pattern: Emma. She wasn't in every photo, of course. That would have been too obvious. But every few months, there she was, a candid shot of her laughing, a picture of her holding a drink, or a group photo where she just happened to be standing next to him. The dates didn't add up, either. Some of these parties were on nights when Emma had told me she was out with her girlfriends or working late. My stomach twisted as I realized how carefully she must have planned these lies, how easily she had woven Brian into the fabric of her life without me noticing. Then I found it, a photo from last night's party. It wasn't on Brian's main feed but buried in his stories, a fleeting image meant to disappear after 24 hours. In the photo, Emma and Brian were standing together, their heads close as they smiled for the camera. She was holding a drink, her body angled toward him in a way that looked comfortable, familiar. The caption read, "Best company of the night." I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. The audacity of it, the blatant disregard for me, for our marriage, it was almost too much to process. But I didn't stop there. I dug further, combing through his tagged photos and comments, piecing together a timeline of their interactions. There were more parties, more photos, more moments that she had conveniently left out of our conversations. The final straw came when I found a video from a few months ago. It wasn't on Brian's profile but on one of his friends' accounts. In the clip, Emma and Brian were sitting on a couch, laughing at something off camera. He leaned over, whispering something in her ear, and she playfully pushed him away, her laughter ringing out. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes. The kind of familiarity they shared didn't happen overnight. This wasn't just some random flirtation at a single party. This was a connection, something that had been building over time. I clenched my phone, my knuckles turning white. If there had been any lingering doubt in my mind about Emma's loyalty, it was gone now. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had been cultivating a relationship with this man right under my nose. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Without thinking, I started the car and drove toward Brian's studio. I had seen the address on his website during my search, a sleek, modern space downtown where he showcased his work. I didn't have a plan, but at this point, I didn't care. By the time I arrived, the sun was high in the sky, casting harsh shadows across the city. I parked across the street, staring at the glass-front building with his name emblazoned on the door. Brian Matthews Photography. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about him. About the man who had been circling my wife like a vulture, waiting for the perfect moment to swoop in. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding. It was time to confront the man behind the smile. Brian's studio was surprisingly modest for someone who radiated such arrogance online. The glass front gave me a clear view inside, where sleek black and white photographs lined the walls. Each shot was meticulously framed, showcasing his undeniable talent. The place was quiet, almost serene, which only fueled my anger. How could someone who had injected so much chaos into my life thrive in such calm surroundings? I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly. The faint smell of coffee and chemicals from photo processing lingered in the air. Brian was there, leaning over a desk with his back to me, scrolling through images on a large monitor. He was taller in person, his presence commanding even in his silence. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "Brian Matthews?" I said, my voice cutting through the stillness. He turned, startled but quick to mask it with a smile. That same smug grin I had seen in countless photos. "That's me," he said, his tone friendly but guarded. His eyes narrowed slightly as he looked me over, like he was trying to place me. "I'm John," I said, stepping closer. "Emma's husband." The smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. "Ah, John, I've heard a lot about you." "Really?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because I've heard a lot about you, too." "Well, not so much heard as seen." He tilted his head, feigning confusion. "Seen?" I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, bringing up the photo from his story. The one of him and Emma, their heads close, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. I held it up for him to see. "This," I said. "Care to explain what's going on here?" Brian's face remained unreadable as he studied the image. Then he let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Look, man, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Emma and I are just friends. That's all." "Friends?" I said, my voice rising. "Is that what you call dancing with her all night? Whispering in her ear? Letting your hands wander?" He raised his hands in mock surrender. Okay, I see where this is going. But I swear, there's nothing going on between us. Emma's an incredible woman, but she's made it clear she's committed to you." I took a step closer, my anger bubbling over. "Don't lie to me, Brian. I've seen the videos, the photos. I've seen the way you look at her." For a moment his mask slipped. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Amusement? It was hard to tell. But then he straightened up, his smile returning, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Look, John," he said, his tone calm but condescending. "I get it. You're upset. But if there's a problem in your marriage, maybe you should take it up with your wife instead of coming here and throwing accusations around." His words hit me like a slap in the face. As much as I hated to admit it, he wasn't entirely wrong. Emma was the one who had made vows to me, not him. But that didn't absolve him of his part in this mess. "Stay away from her," I said, my voice low and menacing. "You might think this is some game, but it's not. Emma is my wife, and I won't let you come between us." Brian's smile widened, his confidence returning. "Fair enough," he said. "But for what it's worth, you should know Emma talks about you all the time. She loves you, maybe more than you realize." I didn't respond. I turned on my heel and walked out, the bell above the door chiming again as I left. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. His words echoed in my mind. "She loves you, maybe more than you realize." Was that supposed to comfort me? Because it didn't. If anything, it made me feel even more confused and betrayed. If she loved me, why would she put herself in situations like this? Why would she let another man get so close? I needed to hear it from her. The whole truth. No more games, no more half-confessions. I started the car and headed home, determined to finally get the answers I deserved. When I got home, I didn't even bother taking off my jacket. I went straight for the living room, where Emma was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine as if everything was perfectly normal, as if nothing had changed. I couldn't stand the calmness in her, this effortless facade she put up to hide the chaos she had created. It was maddening. I stood there for a moment, just watching her, gathering every ounce of strength I had left before I spoke. "You're not even going to ask where I've been?" I said, my voice steady, though my insides were trembling with anger. She looked up, surprised by the sharpness in my tone. "John, what's going on? You look, I don't know, tense." "Really?" I spat, taking a step forward. "You haven't noticed? You haven't noticed that I'm tense?" Her eyes widened, clearly taken aback by my outburst. She closed the magazine, setting it aside and sitting up straighter. "What are you talking about? I thought we were okay. You've been distant lately, but I didn't think it was." "Stop, Emma," I interrupted, my voice cold and deliberate. "Just stop. I'm done with the lies. I went to Brian's studio today." Her face instantly drained of color. She didn't even try to hide her shock, and that told me everything I needed to know. "You what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I went to his studio," I repeated, stepping closer. "I've seen the photos, the videos. I've seen everything. Don't lie to me again, Emma. This has gone too far." Her eyes darted to the floor, avoiding mine. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but no words came out. "You're going to tell me the truth now," I said, my voice quieter but no less intense. "And I'm done waiting. I want to know exactly what happened between you and Brian. Don't give me some half-assed story. Don't try to sugarcoat it. I need the full truth." She shifted uncomfortably, her fingers twisting in her lap. I could see the guilt written all over her face, even if she tried to hide it. "John, I don't know what you want me to say," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It wasn't like you think. Yes, Brian and I had some fun at the party, and yes, we spent time together before that. But there was never anything more than that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was still trying to minimize it, to downplay everything. "Fun? Is that what you call it?" I growled. "You went to a party without telling me the full truth. You lied about where you were. You let him put his hands on you, and now you're telling me it was just fun? Do you think I'm stupid?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. She couldn't even look me in the eye. "No," she whispered. "I don't think you're stupid. I just didn't know how to tell you. And I didn't want to hurt you." I took a step back, the weight of her words hitting me harder than I expected. "You didn't want to hurt me?" I repeated. "But you did hurt me, Emma. You destroyed my trust. You put our entire marriage in jeopardy." "I never meant to," she said, her voice pleading now. "I love you, John. I swear I do. But I didn't realize how much I had pulled away from you. I didn't realize how much I was looking for something that was missing, and Brian was just there, offering attention, offering affection. I didn't think it would lead to this. I never wanted to hurt you." Her confession hit me like a freight train. On one hand, I could hear the sincerity in her voice. She seemed broken, remorseful, maybe even regretful. But on the other hand, I could still see all those moments flashing in front of me. Her with Brian, laughing, close, intimate. All of it felt like a cruel betrayal, no matter how sorry she was now. "You can't just undo this, Emma," I said, my voice low, almost a growl. "You can't just expect me to forgive you because you're sorry now. What you did isn't something you can erase with words." "I know," she whispered, wiping away a tear. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't want to lose you, John." I stayed silent, the weight of her words settling in my chest. For a moment I thought about what she said, about how I had pulled away, about how she had been seeking something outside of our marriage. Was this entirely her fault? Or had I let things slip too? I didn't have an answer for that. All I knew was that the damage had been done. The trust was broken. And no matter how much Emma wanted things to go back to the way they were, it wasn't going to be that simple. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Emma," I said, my voice cracking as I walked toward the door. "I don't know if I can trust you again, but I need space to think. I need time to figure out what I'm going to do." I didn't wait for her reply. Couldn't. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me and leaving her standing there in the silence. The night felt colder than usual as I walked aimlessly through the streets, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I had to find something, anything, to help me make sense of all this. I called my best friend, Mark, hoping for some clarity. "Mark, I don't know what to do," I said, my voice shaking. "She swears nothing happened with him, but I can't shake this feeling." Mark's response was quiet at first, like he was trying to understand what I was saying. "Look, John, you've known Emma for years. You know her better than anyone. But trust is something that's hard to rebuild once it's broken. You have to figure out if you can forgive her, and if you can't, you have to decide what that means for your marriage." I thought about his words as I sat in my car, staring at the empty road. Could I forgive her? Could I look at Emma the same way after everything that had happened? The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee. Emma was still asleep upstairs, but I couldn't bring myself to go up and face her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with Brian. I heard their voices, their words. Everything felt like a trap. I couldn't keep living like this, torn between love and betrayal. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. But could I just walk away? I grabbed my phone and opened the Messages app. Mark's words echoed in my mind. "If you can't forgive her," I typed a message to Emma. "We need to talk." I pressed send before I could second-guess myself. When Emma came downstairs, her eyes immediately met mine. She knew something was off. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "You wanted to talk?" she asked softly, her voice uncertain. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, trying to gauge whether I could still see the woman I married in her eyes, or if she had already slipped away. "I can't keep living like this, Emma," I finally said. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. You betrayed me. You broke my trust." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't speak. She just nodded, like she already knew what was coming. "I need to know if we can fix this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can we fix this, Emma? Or is it too late?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I don't know, John. I really don't. But I'll do anything to make things right." I stood up, pacing around the room, my mind racing. Was there even a way back? Could I ever forget what she did? Or was this the end of everything? I knew it wasn't just her I was trying to forgive. I was also trying to forgive myself for letting things slip so far, for not seeing the warning signs. "I need time," I said finally. "I can't make any decisions right now. But I need you to understand. Things might never go back to the way they were." Emma's face crumpled, and she nodded, her voice barely audible. "I understand." Days passed, and the silence between us grew louder. I stayed in the house, but we barely spoke. I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same. Every room in the house seemed empty, and even the smallest gestures, Emma's smile, the way she would touch my arm, felt distant, foreign. I went through the motions, but nothing felt real. The love that once came so easily felt like a ghost, something I was desperately trying to reach but could never quite grasp. Then, one evening, Emma came to me, her face determined. "John, I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice steady. "I don't want to just sit here in this silence. I want to fight for us." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but a part of me was too scared to let myself believe it. Hadn't I given her a chance to fix this? Hadn't she promised she would do anything to make it right? "I don't know if I can, Emma," I replied quietly, my voice cracking. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She didn't back down. "Then give me a chance to prove it. Give me a chance to show you that I'm worth fighting for." I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at her, wondering if this was another lie, another promise I couldn't count on. But then I thought about everything we had shared, the years, the love, the life we built. I thought about how we had been before all this, how happy we once were. Maybe it was worth trying. Maybe we could find a way back. "I'll try," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But this has to be real, Emma. No more games. No more lies." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I promise." And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe, with time, we could rebuild what was broken. But only time would tell if it was possible. As I stood there, unsure of what the future would bring, I knew one thing for certain. We had a long road ahead of us, but at least we were still walking it together. What do you think? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to confront betrayal in a relationship? How did you move forward? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that will make you think long after the video ends.